Hello, I'm Carol Swain, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. This is the show where we talk about family, faith, politics, and unity, and anything else that's on my mind. And what's on my mind today is the education of America's school children. Whether they're in public, private, homeschools, colleges, and universities, I'm very concerned about the state of education in the United States of America. Anyone that's followed what's taken place knows that we have a crisis, and they will know that something sinister is taking place when it comes to education, when it comes to the curriculum, what our children are being exposed to, as well as the indoctrination when it comes to race. And when it comes to race, we find critical race theory, where young people are being told that if they're white, they are oppressors, they're responsible for all the evils of their ancestors. If they are people of color, they're being told that they're victims and that they have to be liberated. And what has happened is a situation that is not conducive to learning. What has taken place is more like indoctrination. Joining me today to talk about all this is a mother, a freelance writer, and also a special advisor to the 1776 Unites project, which is part of the Woodson Center. So help me to welcome Beth Feely to Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Beth, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Carol. It's an honor to be invited.
And I know that you got involved in education. As a mother, you're always involved in education, so you're educating all the time. But you shared with me once an experience with your child that really galvanized you. And so could you share that with our audience?
Sure. So about 4 years ago, actually, it was January of 4 years ago, we noticed that my daughter's high school was putting on a program that was called Seminar Day. And it was a day of discussion about something they called racial civil rights. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure what that is. I know what civil rights are, but it just struck me as interesting. So I read a little bit about it. And it essentially, it was a day of kind of left-wing indoctrination on race. It was very biased, and the content that it was providing talked about microaggressions and safe spaces and had a Black Lives Matter activist. And it really struck me as very one-sided. And so that was what really woke me up to what was going on in the school and forced me to pay closer attention. And so we brought it to the attention of the school. And the school was not interested in adding voices like yours, like Robert Woodson's, like Glenn Lowry, Shelby Steele, and other voices that I thought should be included for it to be balanced. So we ended up, it became a national news story, and it was something that really, galvanized me and the group that brought it to the attention of the school, but also to our community. And I think it woke a lot of people up as to some of the forces that have been influencing the curriculum choices in our school. And it definitely really changed the trajectory of my involvement and my activities outside of being a mom and a wife, and a community member. And so it was very eye-opening.
And Beth, how did it impact your daughter, what she was being taught?
So, it's interesting at the time, I think she knew that it was one-sided and thought that it should really include, a whole variety of voices so that the kids could learn and choose for themselves. And so she was in favor, I think, of having some alternatives. And so she was very supportive. That was not necessarily true of a lot of the people at the school, obviously. And even after this day, it did take place. We were able to get some alternatives, ways for kids to spend that day. And one of them was going down to the south side of Chicago and meeting with students from that area. And that's what she did. But she went back to school, and the next day was humiliated in front of her entire class for having made that choice by her teacher. So it was really, there's a lot of pressure on kids when they do even voice support for having a balanced, conversation about this. And, it's from the teachers, but a lot of times it's also from their fellow peers. And so parents really do need to pay attention and talk to their kids and listen, so that they can feel encouraged to do what they know is right, but also just to speak their mind, because
Right.
it's hard as a teenager to do that, I think, anyway. But then
You're
especially about
absolutely
topics such as
right.
this.
So, what did you learn? What was the most important thing that you learned from that experience?
I think, it's interesting. I am actually a pretty shy person. I kind of, keep to myself. I have my interests and friends, and try to do my role as a citizen. But I think what it taught me is that you need to step outside your comfort zone, and it can be very intimidating, and it can be even a little scary at times. But that you need to also remain true to yourself. And I think I had hit a point with this issue where I could not remain silent, and I needed to, as difficult as it was, and it is, and it was and still can be difficult. But that was something where I think I realized that I had something within me that gave me the strength to do it. And I also think a lot of that strength came from God. But it was really something, it was empowering. And I think that it's much better to be speaking for what you believe to be true, and on behalf of that, than it is to be in a corner worried that people are going to talk about you, that they're going to say things
Right.
about you, or be scared. I think your kids are looking at you, and I think you need to be an example, but I think also for yourself. I think it can
That
do, and we need more citizens doing that.
that is absolutely true. We're going to take a break, and when we return, more with Beth Feely.
Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain is made possible by Cooper Steel, a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Cooper Steel believes in sponsoring Carol Swain because we believe as she does, you build strong, you stand strong.
What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel is committed to excellence, responsibility, and community. Cooper Steel's motto is, build strong, stand strong. They treat their employees and customers like family. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Learn more about our generous sponsor at coopersteel.com. Demands for political correctness and mandatory race and gender diversity training have placed onerous burdens on businesses, churches, and nonprofits. Learn how to improve relations by educating your team with principle-based training that brings people together rather than driving wedges between them. Unity Training Solutions helps your organization build strong teams by respecting and harnessing individual talent, achieving your goals by providing viable alternatives to the divisive and counterproductive critical race and gender theories is our mission. Our expert facilitators and consultants bring greater harmony to workplaces and educational institutions by respecting everyone's civil rights and equality under the law. We encourage Americans to rediscover and re-embrace our national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. A few of our core values and principles include no hidden agendas, respecting the differences of others. Our citizens share more similarities than differences, and trusting in the traditional principles of hard work, integrity, and accountability. Our seminars are geared towards your organization, educational, business, corporate, as well as churches and nonprofits. Want to know more about how to strengthen your team? Knowledge is power. You can learn more about Unity Training Solutions at unitytrainingsolutions.com.
I'm back with my guest, Beth Feely. And Beth, I could really identify with what you were saying about being shy. And it's something about changes and events happen in our lives that galvanize us, and we realize we can do things that we thought were impossible. So I can imagine that there are a lot of parents out there that are frustrated. They see what's happening in their schools. They know it's wrong, but they're reluctant because they see themselves as shy. And so I think it's very encouraging for you to say that it was a transformative time in your life.
It was definitely for me, and I think even for parents around here. I think for many who were shy or not shy, I think they realized that we all have a role in our communities. I think I've read in some literature that community engagement's at an all-time low. And I think that that is changing, and it's definitely changing in my community. So if I played some small role in that, I'm happy. I wanted to add on, I think the other reason that a lot of parents don't speak up is that they are very worried about any sort of consequences on their children, from the school, from teachers, from peers, from their social circles. And in fact, I especially a few years ago, many people agreed with the positions that we were taking, but they absolutely did not feel comfortable speaking up, and some still don't. And so that is something too that I just would really encourage parents to take that step, because I have not found that there have been major consequences, and really I'm not aware of any. There may be some people who disagree with me. There may be people who are not inviting me to parties that I didn't know about. And that is fine. I mean, I think that on the net benefit, to be able to do the right thing for your community, to do the right thing for your children, for me, far outweighs any sort of consequence that I might have paid socially.
I would agree. And I think that when parents band together, like they should be organized. And that way, there's not going to be retaliation against one particular person's child. If they want to go after a block of students because their parents stood up, I think it's much more difficult. And if you do it as a group, then you're pooling resources. And I think it's very important for parents to do their homework. And I know that you are a writer, and part of preparing to write is you have to do homework. Your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think, I thought I had a fairly good sense of literature that was out there when we were approaching the school. And I have to say that, so I felt confident in addressing the school and questioning. And then after that, I just started reading voraciously on this topic. And it really opened my eyes, and quite frankly, led to actually how I met you, was really because I dug in and really found that, these problems in our schools, this has been happening for far longer than I was aware, and that there are people involved in combating this, but that there are also some very pernicious forces that are behind it and have been for decades. And so I think that the more you become aware of an issue, I think also that also drives you to do something about it. And so, yeah, knowledge is power. It really helps. It also opens doors. I think that you can, reach out to people who have authored articles and start conversations with them. And I just think that it really can ignite a passion, but you do need to do your homework. And I think that that's important.
Excuse me. And for you, it opened the door for you to be part of the Woodson Center. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about the Woodson Center and your role with 1776 Unites?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So one of the wonderful outcomes of being in that group of parents that were trying to bring about change at the school was that I had reached out. I was familiar with the work of Robert Woodson. And for those that aren't familiar, the Woodson Center has been around for 40 years. It's a nonprofit based in DC. And what it does is it goes and it looks for low-income grassroots programs and resources them. But all of these programs are run on what you could call the Woodson principles, which is actually the topic of his recent book. And they are very much about personal agency, about self-determination, about a very entrepreneurial way of addressing the problems associated with poverty. And I knew from my reading of Robert Woodson that I had a feeling that he would have a problem with what was going on at our school. So I reached out to him, and indeed, he did not agree with it at all. And we really connected on this whole issue of this message of victimization and victimhood that really is what underlies. People also call it the race grievance industry. Yeah.
And the thing too about it is that we focus a lot on the impact on Black kids of being told that you're a victim and the society is stacked against you and that everything is racist. And I've spoken a lot about the crippling effect, but it also affects white kids too when it comes to guilt and shaming, because many of them that become social justice warriors, they feel ashamed that they were born with white skin. And I think it's just so inappropriate for us to shame anyone's child.
I certainly don't think that type of approach of shaming and blaming is going to result in any sort of improvement in overall race relations. I think what you really need to do is get to know people as individuals and stop the focus on the group and make it about the person. Race may be a factor, but it's certainly not the determining factor in who a person is. And so, yes, I think the focus is all wrong there. And that is what Robert Woodson and I connected over, was this message is it's so detrimental to the people that he serves. And I knew it was very detrimental to all the students in my school, and the schools are across the country. And so, yes, that led to me doing some writing and editing and eventually helping him launch his vision of the 1776 Unite movement.
That is great. And we're going to hear from our sponsors again. We'll be back.
Cooper Steel is a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee. What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel's motto is, "Build strong, stand strong." Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain.
For those of you who would like to know what exactly our children are facing in their education system, this is a must-read book. It will equip you and prepare you to make decisions about your child's health, about your child's education. So I want to encourage every one of you to grab a copy of Dr. Swain's book and join with me and Carol on the front lines in this critical time to eradicate the liberal abduction of our children.
I'm back with my guest, Beth Feely. And Beth, I know that with 1776 Unites, and I'm also a part of that, we've been working on curriculum. Would you like to talk a little bit about what you think is needed? Like, what do American school children need to be prepared to function as citizens in the United States, in our society today?
Certainly. So I think what children need to learn is the truth. I think they need to learn about the high points of American history and the low points. I think they need to learn that America is a very unique experiment. It's really unlike any other country that has been formed before. And so I think it's important that children learn that context. I think I was probably a lot older than I should have been once I fully appreciated that. I think they need to stop being taught a distorted view of history. I think you can teach accurately what happened. It's bad enough in terms of slavery and in terms of other terrible chapters in our history. I think what happens often is that those chapters get taught with distortion, without context, and it leaves kids with this very bad feeling about what America stands for, what it is. And it forgets to teach the good, or maybe the good is paid lip service. But for some reason, there seems to be this trend in looking at our history through a 21st century lens. And I find that troubling. I don't think it's accurate. I don't think it's really teaching kids how to look at history so that they can actually learn and appreciate our background, but also the progress that's been made. And I think as it relates with 1776 Unites, we really felt like, yes, we should be teaching more about Black history because kids are learning some basics, but they are definitely not learning about some very inspirational figures. And so we sought to expand that knowledge base. And that's really the gist of why we've chosen to do the 1776 curriculum as we have.
Right, and that's great. And I agree that our young people are not being taught about America's positive contributions to the world, how we became the envy of the nations, so much so that people risked their lives to come to America. And I can tell you that when I was being educated, that we were patriotic. And I knew that I lived in the greatest nation in the world. And I saw, I was born and raised during a time when there really was systemic racism, but I watched the Civil Rights Act pass. I watched the breakdown of barriers, and I watched opportunities being created for people like me. And what I find today is that the messages that are coming in the classroom, whether we're talking about grade school, high school, or colleges, those messages about America are so negative and they're life-sapping.
Yes, or the fact that you've achieved so much by adhering to these basic principles, and that somehow makes you an outsider, or that somehow you're the exception, not the rule. And so it's really a shame because people still come here from all over the world because of what this country offers in the way of opportunity. If you are willing to work hard, if you are willing to do what's necessary to make your dream come true. It is not perfect. Things are not perfectly fair, nor will they ever be. And I think that's the other trend I notice is that there's definitely a social justice or an injection of social justice into the way that history is being taught. And that it's something that gives I think, false hope that there is this somehow there's going to be perfect fairness. And you hear this term equity, which really means equality of outcome, that's going to be delivered somehow if we just, denigrate America enough and dismantle these systemic problems and we, I guess, recreate them through the government. And it's not, it's never been done. And I think that kids are being fed a diet that I think drives them towards that versus really celebrating freedom and the values that the country has always stood for, and that has really made it possible for people to achieve like you have. I mean, your story is so inspirational, and I'm always happy when I see it told, because I think that is far more what America is about than much of the negative material that's being taught to kids.
Well, Beth, I think it's really important for our young people, and not just young people, old people, too, to read the Declaration of Independence and also the Constitution, and be familiar with the Bill of Rights, because it's so much under attack that they need to go to those original documents.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, I was joking with a friend the other day that I think every year people should read the Constitution and they should read Animal Farm. And then they should compare and contrast.
We have to throw in George Orwell's 1984. They need to read that today.
Yeah, something by Orwell, because I really do think that those juxtaposed kind of tell the extremes of what, we've seen mankind live through. And I think there's only one choice when you put them side by side.
Well, I am very encouraged by what I see among young people, because we see, we see all sorts of things on TV, and sometimes we see the worst of the worst, but in the world that I navigate in, I am so encouraged by the young people I encounter that have traditional values. They love America. They want us to have a solid foundation. And I think that it's easy to get caught up in the negative. And sometimes in our own families, we see our children and grandchildren behaving in ways that we don't like. But I think that there's some cause for optimism. What do you think about that?
I agree. On some days more than others, because I live in an area where much of this has taken hold, and I see that many kids have been led astray. I do think that what the country stands for appeals to people. They don't like being told what to do. They kind of know deep down when they're being fed a lie. And so I think it is just so important. And unfortunately, our culture, many of our cultural institutions are not promoting American values. And so I do think it's incumbent upon parents, grandparents, circles of friends to make sure that you are talking to kids regularly about what's happening in the world and how to interpret it and bring them back to, again, it may be flawed, but it really is the best thing going. And what's really beautiful about it is that it constantly gets better. We're in a country that allows itself to iteratively improve. And I think if you look at the progress that's been made throughout our history, that is the story. But we really do need to be deliberate and intentional to make sure that story is told. And there are so many resources. I think I'm encouraged also, Carol, just by all of the different people in this space that are getting more resources out there to teach, to restore civics, and to teach, full and complete history so that our kids are empowered with that knowledge.
Those are strong supports that our viewers and our listeners and everyone watching can really take to heart, because we are making progress. And thank you so much for being on the show today. And I'll be back after these messages with a closing statement.
Cooper Steel is a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee. What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel's motto is, build strong, stand strong. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Demands for political correctness and mandatory race and gender diversity training have placed onerous burdens on businesses, churches, and nonprofits. Learn how to improve relations by educating your team with principle-based training that brings people together rather than driving wedges between them. Unity Training Solutions helps your organization build strong teams by respecting and harnessing individual talent. Achieving your goals by providing viable alternatives to the divisive and counterproductive critical race and gender theories is our mission. Our expert facilitators and consultants bring greater harmony to workplaces and educational institutions by respecting everyone's civil rights and equality under the law. We encourage Americans to rediscover and re-embrace our national motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. A few of our core values and principles include no hidden agendas, respecting the differences of others. Our citizens share more similarities than differences, and trusting in the traditional principles of hard work, integrity, and accountability. Our seminars are geared towards your organization, educational, business, corporate, as well as churches and nonprofits. Want to know more about how to strengthen your team? Knowledge is power. You can learn more about Unity Training Solutions at unitytrainingsolutions.com.
For those of you who would like to know what exactly our children are facing in their education system, this is a must-read book. It will equip you and prepare you to make decisions about your child's health, about your child's education. So I want to encourage every one of you to grab a copy of Dr. Swain's book and join with me and Carol on the front lines in this critical time to eradicate the liberal abduction of our children.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. I hope you've enjoyed my conversation with Beth Feely and you feel better equipped as a parent to address some of the issues that are taking place in our public and private schools. These are issues that only parent involvement can address. Unfortunately, because of teachers' unions and the politics of the left that have taken over so much of our educational curriculum, it will take proactive parents like you to begin to change America in the direction so that our children will be well equipped and prepared for the future. So be sure to tune in next week.